The year was 2147, and humanity had finally cracked the code of interstellar travel. What once seemed like science fiction was now reality. Dozens of research vessels roamed the stars, searching for signs of life beyond Earth. Among them was the Astraea, a sleek spacecraft designed to withstand the harshest conditions of space. Its mission wasn't just exploration, it was discovery. Dr. Ilara Voss stood at her workstation on the bridge, staring intently at the holographic display in front of her. Her dark hair was tied back into a neat bun, and her sharp green eyes scanned lines of data scrolling across the screen. She was one of the brightest minds aboard the ship, known for her expertise in xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. Though no confirmed extraterrestrial species had been encountered yet, she believed it was only a matter of time. Ilara's fingers tapped rhythmically against the console as she analyzed the latest transmission picked up by the Astraea sensors. It wasn't unusual for deep space probes to detect strange signals. Most turned out to be natural phenomena like pulsars or cosmic radiation. But this one was different. The signal came from a distant moon orbiting a massive gas giant far outside their planned route. Its pattern was irregular but deliberate, almost rhythmic, like someone, or something, was trying to communicate. "What do we have here?" Captain Rennick asked, stepping onto the bridge. His voice carried authority, but there was also curiosity in his tone. He leaned over Ilara's shoulder, squinting at the glowing projections before him. "It's not random noise," Ilara replied without looking up. "There are definite patterns, repetitive sequences, and—" She hesitated, narrowing her eyes at a particular section of the data. "This part looks like coordinates." Captain Rennick raised an eyebrow. "Coordinates? Are you sure?" "I'm running simulations now," Ilara said, adjusting the parameters on her console. "But yes, I think so. Someone, or something, is inviting us to visit." The captain straightened up, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Could be a trap," he muttered under his breath. Then louder, "Or it could be nothing more than interference from some unknown source." Ilara shook her head. "I don't think so. Look at these clusters." She pointed to several sections of the signal highlighted in blue. "They match mathematical constants, pi, phi, even Fibonacci sequences. Whoever sent this knows math. Advanced math." Rennick frowned. If it's advanced enough to send a message using universal constants, why aren't they speaking plain language? Why all the riddles? "That's what makes it fascinating," Ilara said, turning to face him with a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Maybe they're testing us, seeing if we're smart enough to decode it. Or maybe—" She trailed off, her gaze drifting back to the screen. "Maybe they're afraid." "Afraid?" Rennick echoed skeptically. "Of what?" "Us," Ilara whispered. "What if they've been watching us for centuries? Watching how we treat each other, our planet, everything around us. What if they're scared of what we might become?" For a moment, silence filled the bridge. The hum of machinery and the soft glow of control panels were the only sounds. Finally, Rennick sighed. "All right, Doctor. Let's assume you're right. We'll adjust course and investigate. But let's keep our guard up. If this is a first contact scenario, we need to proceed carefully." Ilara nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it, the moment she'd dreamed about since childhood. First contact. Real, tangible evidence that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. Still, doubt lingered at the edges of her mind. Was it truly possible? Or was she reading too much into a string of numbers? As the Astraea changed course, heading toward the mysterious moon, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something profound awaited them. Over the next few hours, she pored over every detail of the signal, dissecting its structure piece by piece. That's when she noticed something extraordinary. Buried within the data stream were fragments of what appeared to be an ancient language. At first glance, the symbols seemed incomprehensible, but upon closer inspection, Ilara realized they bore faint similarities to human DNA sequences. How could that be? Alien messages shouldn't contain anything remotely resembling Earth biology. Unless. Her pulse quickened as a theory began forming in her mind. What if humans weren't entirely unique? What if long ago, another species had influenced the evolution of life on Earth? The idea was preposterous, bordering on heretical, but the evidence was undeniable. Something, or someone, had left their mark on humanity's genetic code. "Captain," Ilara called out, her voice trembling slightly. When Rennick approached, she showed him the findings. These aren't just coordinates. They're instructions, a map leading to something important. And these symbols, they're linked to us, to humans. Rennick stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he said, "If you're right, Doctor, then we're about to uncover something bigger than any of us imagined." Ilara swallowed hard, her palms sweaty despite the cool temperature of the ship. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Whatever waited for them on that distant moon, it would change everything. For better or worse, humanity was about to take its first step into a new chapter of existence, and Ilara Voss would be at the center of it all. The journey to the mysterious moon took 3 days, but for Dr. Ilara Voss, it felt like an eternity. Every hour brought a mix of excitement and unease as she prepared herself mentally for what lay ahead. The signal they had decoded wasn't just a message. It was an invitation. An alien civilization wanted them to come closer, to step into their domain. But why? And what would they find when they arrived? As the Estrella approached the moon, its surface came into view on the ship's main viewport. It was unlike anything anyone on board had ever seen. The terrain shimmered faintly under the dim light of the distant gas giant, glowing with hues of blue and silver that seemed almost otherworldly. Towering crystalline structures jutted out from the ground, forming intricate patterns that looked both natural and artificial at the same time. They weren't buildings in the traditional sense. They appeared alive, pulsating subtly as though breathing. "This place is beautiful," murmured Lieutenant Jace Torres, the ship's pilot, his voice tinged with awe. He adjusted the controls, guiding the vessel toward a safe landing zone near one of the larger formations, but also kind of creepy. Ilara nodded silently, her eyes glued to the scene outside. She couldn't explain it, but there was something about those glowing crystals that felt familiar, like a distant memory trying to resurface. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, and she clenched her fists to steady herself. Whatever this place was, it stirred emotions deep within her, ones she couldn't quite name. Once the ship touched down, Captain Rennick assembled a small team to explore the area. Alongside Ilara were 2 security officers, armed with non-lethal weapons designed to incapacitate rather than harm, and engineer Mia Chen, who carried scanning equipment to analyze the environment. As they stepped onto the surface, the air around them buzzed softly, carrying a strange energy that made the hair on their arms stand up. "Stay alert," Rennick ordered, his hand resting near the holster of his sidearm. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." The group moved cautiously toward the nearest crystalline structure. Up close, the crystals emitted a faint hum that resonated through their chests, almost like a heartbeat. Ilara reached out tentatively, brushing her fingertips against the smooth surface. To her surprise, the crystal responded, not with cold rigidity, but with warmth. It pulsed gently beneath her touch, and a series of glowing symbols began to appear along its edges, flowing like liquid light. "What did you do?" Maya asked, her scanner beeping rapidly as it tried to process the phenomenon. "I didn't do anything," Ilara replied, pulling her hand back quickly. "It reacted to me." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. A low rumble echoed through the air, growing louder with each passing second. The team froze, exchanging nervous glances as dust particles swirled around them. Then, without warning, a massive figure emerged from behind the towering crystals. At first glance, it looked like a creature born from dreams or nightmares, Standing nearly 12 feet tall, the being radiated power and grace. Its body was encased in iridescent armor that shimmered with every movement, reflecting colors no human eye could fully comprehend. Long, elegant limbs ended in delicate yet strong hands, and its face was partially obscured by a translucent visor that glowed faintly. Most striking of all, however, was its presence. There was an aura of calm authority surrounding the being, commanding respect even before it spoke. For a moment, silence reigned. No one moved. Then, slowly, the figure turned its gaze toward Ilara, ignoring the rest of the team entirely. It stepped forward, its movements fluid and deliberate, until it stood mere inches away from her. Before anyone could react, it wrapped its arms around her in a gentle but firm embrace. Ilara's breath hitched in her throat. She should have been terrified. This wasn't a lion, after all. But instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The being's touch was warm, comforting, and strangely familiar, like being held by someone she'd known her entire life. And then, in perfect English, it whispered, "At last, I found you, my human." The words sent shockwaves through the group. Gasps erupted from the others, and Rennick instinctively raised his weapon, though he hesitated to fire. Ilara, meanwhile, was too stunned to speak. Her mind raced to make sense of what had just happened. How did this creature know her? Why had it singled her out? And what did it mean by "my human"? The being released her gently and took a step back, tilting its head as if studying her reaction. Through the visor, Ilara caught a glimpse of luminous eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. Finally, it spoke again, its voice melodic and rich with emotion. "My name is Silithra," it said, addressing the entire group now. "I am Queen of the Lumivari. We have waited millennia for your arrival, Dr. Ilara Voss." Ilara blinked, struggling to process the situation. "Waited for me? Why?" Silithra extended a slender hand, gesturing toward the crystalline structure behind her. "Come. All will be explained. But know this, you are not alone. You never were." Rennick stepped forward, his tone firm but respectful. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, if that's what we're calling you, we need answers. Who are you? What do you want with us?" Silithra regarded him with a serene expression. "You seek knowledge, Captain. So do we. Our paths crossed long ago, though your kind is forgotten. Today, we begin anew." Despite his skepticism, Rennick lowered his weapon slightly. There was something disarming about Silithra's demeanor. Her confidence, her calmness, her obvious intelligence. Still, trust didn't come easily. "We'll follow protocol," he said firmly. "No sudden moves, no surprises." "Agreed." Silithra inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Agreed. Follow me." With that, she turned and began walking deeper into the crystalline labyrinth. Ilara hesitated only briefly before following, her heart pounding in her chest. Something inside her told her this was right, that she needed to see where this path led. The others reluctantly fell into step behind her, keeping their weapons ready but pointed downward. As they ventured further, the air grew warmer, and the hum of the crystals intensified. More symbols lit up along the walls, responding to their presence. Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that these markings were meant for her, that somehow, impossibly, they recognized her. When they reached a large chamber at the center of the structure, Silithra stopped and turned to face them. In the middle of the room floated a massive orb of pure light, pulsating rhythmically like a living thing. It cast intricate patterns across the walls, illuminating the space with an ethereal glow. "This is our archive," Silithra explained. "Here lies the history of our people. And yours." Ilara stared at the orb, mesmerized. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt drawn to it, as if it held secrets she desperately needed to uncover. Whatever doubts or fears she harbored melted away in that moment, replaced by a singular certainty. Her life, and humanity's destiny, was about to change forever. The chamber was filled with an almost sacred silence, broken only by the soft hum of the glowing orb at its center. Dr. Ilara Voss stood frozen, her eyes locked onto the pulsating light, as if it were whispering secrets directly to her soul. The others in her team shifted uncomfortably behind her, their weapons still poised but lowered slightly, unsure how to react to the surreal scene unfolding before them. Silithra moved closer to the orb, her iridescent armor shimmering like liquid starlight. She extended one graceful hand toward it, and the light responded instantly, swirling faster and casting intricate patterns across the walls. Symbols that resembled those etched into the crystalline structures outside began to appear, glowing faintly against the dark stone. "This is our shared history," Silithra said softly, her melodic voice echoing through the chamber. "A story buried deep within your bloodline, waiting to be rediscovered." Ilara's heart raced as she stepped forward instinctively, drawn to the orb despite herself. Captain Rennick reached out to stop her, his hand brushing against her arm. "Wait, Doctor," he cautioned. "We don't know what this thing does." But Ilara shook her head gently, pulling away. "It's okay," she murmured, though she wasn't entirely sure why she felt so certain. I think I'm supposed to touch it." Before anyone could protest further, she placed her palm on the surface of the orb. Instantly, warmth spread through her body, followed by a rush of images and sensations so vivid they took her breath away. She saw flashes of ancient landscapes, glowing forests bathed in perpetual twilight, rivers of molten silver winding through valleys, and towering spires made of crystal that hummed with life. She felt emotions too powerful to describe. Joy, sorrow, longing, connection, all tied together by a bond she couldn't fully comprehend. And then, amidst the chaos of visions, she saw them. Beings who looked remarkably like humans, though their features were sharper, their movements more fluid. They walked alongside creatures resembling Silithra's people, the Lumivari, working together, sharing knowledge, laughing, and building something extraordinary. It was clear these two species had once coexisted in harmony, united by a profound symbiotic relationship. As quickly as the vision began, it faded, leaving Ilara gasping for air. She stumbled back, clutching her chest, her mind reeling from the flood of memories that weren't hers but somehow felt deeply familiar. "What did you see?" Silithra asked, her luminous eyes studying Ilara intently. Ilara struggled to find words. "I saw us, humans, and your kind, together, long ago." Silithra nodded solemnly. "Yes, millennia ago, our peoples were bound by a sacred alliance. We called ourselves the Synthesis, a union of minds, bodies, and spirits. Your ancestors carried fragments of our essence within them, just as we carried pieces of yours. It allowed us to share abilities, knowledge, and even lifespans far beyond what either species could achieve alone." "But what happened?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling. "Why did we lose that connection?" Silithra's expression darkened, and for the first time, Ilara detected sadness in her demeanor. "Cataclysm," she replied simply. "A great upheaval on Earth erased much of what we had built together. Natural disasters, wars among your kind, and eventually, fear of what you might become if our bond grew too strong. Some among my people believed it would dilute our identity, while others feared humanity's unpredictability. The rift widened until contact was severed entirely." Ilara listened in stunned silence, trying to process the enormity of what she'd been told. If Silithra spoke the truth, and everything about her presence suggested she did, then humanity's origins were far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. But there was another question gnawing at her mind. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why now?" Silithra smiled faintly, a gesture both comforting and enigmatic. "Because you carry the strongest echoes of our past within you, Dr. Voss. Your genetic makeup bears traces of the synthesis bond, stronger than any human we've encountered since. You are not merely a descendant, you are a bridge, a living link between our worlds." Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. The weight of Silithra's words settled heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just a scientist here to observe. She was part of something far greater, something ancient and monumental. And yet doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. How could she trust this alien queen? Wasn't it possible that Silithra was manipulating her, using her for some unknown purpose? Her internal conflict must have shown on her face because Silithra tilted her head slightly, as if sensing her unease. "You need not believe me blindly," she said gently. "Trust will come with time. For now, allow me to guide you." With that, Silithra gestured for Ilara to sit cross-legged on the floor beside her. Reluctantly, Ilara complied, feeling awkward under the watchful eyes of her teammates. Silithra closed her eyes and placed her hands near Ilara's temples without touching them. A soft glow emanated from her fingertips, and Ilara felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through her skull. "Relax," Silithra instructed. "Let your mind open. I will show you how to access the dormant abilities within you." At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Ilara began to feel changes, subtle at first, but growing stronger. Her senses sharpened dramatically. She could hear the faintest vibrations in the air, see colors shifting in the shadows, and even taste the metallic tang of energy around her. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Captain Rennick cleared his throat loudly, breaking the spell. "Enough," he barked. "Whatever you're doing to her, stop it." Silithra opened her eyes calmly and lowered her hands. "She is unharmed, Captain. What she experiences now is merely the awakening of what has always been hers to claim." Ilara blinked, struggling to adjust to the sudden influx of heightened perception. She looked up at Rennick, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm fine, Captain. Really." Rennick frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he turned to Silithra. "You say she's special, that she's some kind of bridge. Fine, but bridges go both ways. What do you want from us?" Silithra regarded him thoughtfully. "What we want is simple: reunification. To heal the fracture between our peoples and restore the balance lost long ago. But such a task requires patience, understanding, and mutual trust. We cannot force this bond. It must be nurtured over time." "And if we refuse?" Rennick challenged. "Then you leave us no choice but to continue watching from afar," Silithra replied evenly. "But know this: humanity stands at a crossroads. Without guidance, your path may lead to self-destruction. We offer you a chance to transcend your limitations, to evolve." Her words hung heavy in the air, sparking tension among the group. Lieutenant Torres shifted uncomfortably, while Engineer Chen muttered something under her breath about too many risks. Only Ilara remained silent, her thoughts racing. That night, after returning to the Estrella, Ilara lay awake in her quarters, staring at the ceiling. Her mind buzzed with questions and possibilities. She replayed every moment of her encounter with Silithra, analyzing each word, each gesture. Despite her lingering doubts, one thing was undeniable. She felt different, changed, as if a door inside her had been unlocked, revealing a world she hadn't known existed. Her reverie was interrupted when her communicator beeped softly. It was Captain Rennick. "Doctor," he said gruffly, "we need to talk. Now." Ilara sighed and climbed out of bed, steeling herself for another round of debate. But as she walked toward the meeting room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her destiny was no longer solely her own. Whatever decisions lay ahead, they wouldn't just affect her. They would shape the future of two species. For better or worse, she was ready. The meeting room aboard the Estrella was dimly lit, its walls lined with holographic displays showing star maps and data streams. Captain Rennick sat at the head of the table, his face stern and unreadable. Across from him, Dr. Ilara Voss fidgeted nervously, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The rest of the team, Lieutenant Jace Torres, Engineer Mia Chen, and 2 security officers, sat around the table, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright distrust. "All right," Rennick began. leaning forward and resting his elbows on the table. Let's cut to the chase. We've got a situation here that none of us signed up for. An alien queen claims humanity has some kind of ancient bond with her people, and somehow you're at the center of it, Doctor. Ilara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her. She knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. I understand your concerns, Captain, she said carefully. But Silithra hasn't given us any reason not to believe her. Everything she's shown me so far aligns with what we've discovered about the signal, and about ourselves. Rennick raised an eyebrow. That's a big leap of faith, Doctor. You're asking us to trust a being who literally hugged you out of nowhere and started talking about ancient bonds. For all we know, this could be a manipulation tactic. I agree with the captain. Lieutenant Torres chimed in, his arms crossed over his chest. This feels too convenient. Why now? Why her? It's almost like they planned this whole thing. Ilara shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. It doesn't matter why or how it happened. What matters is that there's truth in what she's saying. I felt it. The connection. The memories. They're real. Mia Chen adjusted her glasses, her tone more measured but no less skeptical. Even if we assume she's telling the truth, how do we know this isn't dangerous? Awakening dormant ability sounds great, until something goes wrong. What if these changes harm you, or worse, make you unstable? Ilara hesitated, glancing down at her hands. Over the past few days, she'd noticed subtle physical changes. Her eyes occasionally glowed faintly when she focused intensely, and her heightened senses often left her disoriented. But she couldn't deny the clarity she gained during those moments, the way her mind seemed to expand beyond its usual limits. Still, admitting these changes aloud felt risky. Look, she said finally, meeting each person's gaze in turn. I'm not saying we should blindly follow Silithra's every word, but we can't ignore the evidence either. This isn't just about me, it's about humanity. If there's even a chance we can learn from them, grow stronger, don't we owe it to ourselves to explore that? Her words hung in the air, met with silence. Finally, one of the security officers spoke up. What happens if we say no? Do we just leave and pretend none of this ever happened? That's exactly what we should do, Torres snapped. We came here to investigate a signal, not get dragged into some cosmic family reunion. Let's collect our data, report back to Earth, and let the higher-ups decide what to do next, and risk losing this opportunity forever. Ilara countered, her voice rising slightly. If we walk away now, we might never get another chance to reconnect with the Lumiveri. Think about what we could gain. Technology, knowledge, maybe even solutions to problems we've been struggling with for centuries. Captain Rennick rubbed his temples, clearly torn. He trusted Ilara's expertise, but the stakes were unimaginably high. One misstep could jeopardize not only their mission, but potentially humanity itself. After a long pause, he sighed heavily. Doctor, I need you to be honest with me. Are you sure about this? About Silithra? About everything she's told you? Ilara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I can't promise she's completely trustworthy. No one can. But I believe she genuinely wants to help. Not just me, but all of us. And I think walking away would be a mistake. Rennick studied her for a moment before nodding slowly. All right, here's what we'll do. We'll continue engaging with Silithra, but under strict conditions. No solo visits to the surface. All interactions will be monitored and recorded. And if anything feels off, we pull the plug immediately. Understood. Ilara nodded, relief washing over her. Understood. Over the next several days, the team worked closely with Silithra, learning more about the Lumiveri and their history. Silithra introduced them to mental exercises designed to awaken latent abilities within Ilara, guiding her through meditative practices that helped her control her newfound powers. At first, progress was slow and frustrating. Ilara struggled to maintain focus, often overwhelmed by the intensity of her heightened senses. But gradually, she began to adapt. One evening, as the sun of the distant gas giant dipped below the horizon, casting the crystalline structures in a soft golden glow, Silithra led Ilara to a secluded clearing. "Tonight," she said, "we delve deeper. You've mastered the basics. Now it's time to embrace the full potential of your heritage." Ilara nodded nervously, sitting cross-legged on the cool ground. Silithra mirrored her position, placing her hands near Ilara's without touching. A warm energy radiated from her palms, enveloping Ilara in a cocoon of light. "Close your eyes," Silithra instructed. "Breathe deeply. Feel the energy flowing through you." As Ilara complied, she felt herself slipping into a trance-like state. The world around her faded, replaced by vivid images flashing across her mind. She saw flashes of her childhood, moments she hadn't thought about in years, but interwoven with scenes of glowing forests and towering spires. Voices whispered in languages she didn't recognize yet somehow understood. Memories that weren't hers flooded her consciousness, filling gaps in her understanding of who she truly was. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her temples, and she gasped, snapping out of the vision. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her head, trembling. What was that?" she stammered. Silithra placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Memories returning," she explained gently. "Your mind is adjusting to truths long buried. It will take time, but you are strong enough to endure it." Despite the discomfort, Ilara felt a strange sense of peace. Each revelation brought her closer to understanding her role in this grand tapestry of existence. Yet doubts still lingered, not just about Silithra, but about herself. Could she truly bear the responsibility of bridging two worlds? Back on the Estrella, tensions simmered among the crew. While some, like Mia Chen, remained cautiously optimistic, others grew increasingly uneasy. Lieutenant Torres, in particular, voiced his concerns loudly and often. "She's changing," he muttered to Rennick during one heated discussion. "Every day, she's less like us and more like them. How do we know she won't turn against us?" Rennick frowned, pacing the length of his quarters. "We don't," he admitted. "But right now, she's our best shot at figuring out what's really going on here. Until we know otherwise, we stick to the plan." Meanwhile, Ilara wrestled with her own inner turmoil. Dreams plagued her sleep, visions of starlit skies and glowing rivers intertwined with flashes of conflict and betrayal. In one particularly vivid dream, she saw humans and Lumivari standing side by side, united in purpose. Then, without warning, the scene shifted. Fire rained from the sky, and chaos erupted as both species turned on each other. When she woke, drenched in sweat, she realized the dream carried a message. Trust was fragile, easily shattered by fear and misunderstanding. Humanity's past encounters with extraterrestrial life, if they existed, had ended in tragedy. Would history repeat itself, or could they forge a new path together? For now, the answer eluded her. But as she gazed out the viewport at the shimmering moon below, she vowed to find it, even if it meant confronting the darkest corners of her own soul. The days blurred into weeks as the Estrella crew continued their uneasy partnership with Silithra and the Lumivari. Tensions aboard the ship simmered just below the surface, a volatile mix of curiosity, fear, and skepticism. For Dr. Ilara Voss, every interaction with Silithra brought new revelations and new challenges. Her heightened abilities grew stronger, but so did the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel herself changing, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. It was as if pieces of her identity were being rewritten, stitched together with threads from another world. One evening, after a particularly grueling session with Silithra, Ilara returned to the ship exhausted but restless. The images from her latest vision lingered in her mind, flashes of ancient battles, broken alliances, and bitter betrayals between humans and Lumivari. These weren't mere dreams. They felt like fragments of history buried deep within her DNA, resurfacing bit by bit. Each memory carried an unspoken warning. Trust was fragile, and unity came at a cost. As she sat alone in the mess hall nursing a cup of synthetic tea, engineer Mia Chen joined her unexpectedly. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Maya said lightly, sliding into the seat across from her. Ilara managed a weak smile. "Maybe I have. Or maybe ghosts are seeing me." Mia tilted her head, studying her closely. "What's really going on, Ilara? You've been different lately. Not just the glowing eyes or whatever else is happening to you. You seem distant." "I'm fine," Ilara replied automatically, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. After a pause, she sighed. "It's just a lot to process. Everything Silithra tells me makes sense in some ways, but it also raises more questions. What if we're walking into something we can't handle?" Mia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Do you think she's lying to us?" "No," Ilara admitted. "I don't think she's lying. But I do think there's more to this story than she's telling. There's something dark beneath all the talk of reunification and harmony." Before Maya could respond, the ship's alarms blared suddenly, jolting them both to attention. Red lights flashed overhead as Captain Rennick's voice crackled through the intercom. "All hands, report to your stations immediately. We've detected multiple unidentified vessels approaching the moon." Ilara's heart sank. This was exactly what she'd feared, a complication they weren't prepared for. She followed Mia to the bridge, where chaos reigned. Lieutenant Torres was already manning the controls, his fingers flying over the console as he tracked the incoming ships. "They're not Lumivari," he announced grimly. "Designs don't match anything we've seen before." Captain Rennick stood rigid, his jaw clenched. "Hail them. Find out who they are and what they want." Moments later, a distorted voice filled the bridge. "This is Commander Callis of the Purifiers. Withdraw your vessel immediately or face destruction." "Purifiers," Ilara whispered, her stomach twisting. The name sent a chill down her spine. Silithra appeared on the main viewport via a holographic transmission, her expression unusually tense. "They are remnants of my people, those who opposed the Synthesis Alliance. They believe humanity corrupted our essence and must be eradicated." Rennick turned sharply toward Ilara. "You didn't mention this faction earlier." "I didn't know," Ilara protested. "Silithra never said anything about internal divisions within her species." Silithra's voice cut through the tension. "There was no need to burden you with this knowledge until now. The Purifiers have always existed on the fringes of our society, clinging to outdated ideals. But they grow bolder with time. Commander Kalis isn't bluffing," Torres warned. "Their weapon systems are charging. If we don't act soon, they'll open fire." "What do you suggest we do?" Rennick demanded, glaring at Silithra. "Fight? Run? Or stand here while they blow us apart?" Silithra hesitated, then spoke firmly. "We cannot allow them to destroy the crystalline archive. It holds the key to restoring the bond between our peoples. Without it, everything we've worked toward will be lost." "So what's the plan?" Ilara asked, stepping forward. "How do we stop them?" Silithra met her gaze steadily. "Together, you and I must activate the Archive's defensive systems. It is the only way to protect this place and ensure the future of both our species." Ilara nodded, determination outweighing her fear. "Let's go." Back on the moon's surface, Ilara and Silithra raced toward the central chamber housing the glowing orb. The ground trembled beneath their feet as explosions erupted in the distance. The Purifiers had begun their assault. Ilara's senses were on high alert, her heightened awareness picking up every vibration, every shift in energy around them. "This way," Silithra urged, leading her through a narrow passageway lined with pulsating crystals. As they entered the chamber, the orb flared brightly, reacting to their presence. Silithra placed her hands on its surface, closing her eyes in concentration. "You must join me," she instructed. "Channel your energy into the orb. Focus." Ilara hesitated, unsure how to proceed. But then she remembered the exercises Silithra had taught her, how to harness the latent power within herself. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and placed her hands alongside Silithra's. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, warmth spread through her palms, merging with the light emanating from the orb. Images flooded her mind again, but this time, they weren't fragmented memories. They were instructions, patterns of energy flowing in intricate sequences. Instinctively, she guided the energy along those paths, weaving it into a protective shield that expanded outward, enveloping the entire structure. Outside, the Purifier fleet launched another barrage of attacks, but the newly activated defenses repelled them effortlessly. Shockwaves rippled across the crystalline formations, sending shards of light cascading into the sky. "It's working," Silithra breathed, her voice filled with awe. "You're doing it, Ilara." But victory came at a cost. The strain of channeling so much energy left Ilara physically drained, her legs buckling beneath her. Silithra caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her gently. "You've done well," Silithra murmured, brushing a strand of hair from Ilara's face. "Rest now. The worst is over. For now." As darkness crept into the edges of her vision, Ilara clung to one thought. They had succeeded. The archive was safe, at least for the moment. But the battle wasn't truly over. Somewhere out there, the Purifiers still lurked, plotting their next move. And deeper still, shadows of the past loomed large, threatening to unravel everything they had fought to protect. When Ilara finally woke hours later, back aboard the Estrella, she found Captain Rennick waiting for her in the medical bay. His expression was unreadable as he handed her a datapad containing footage of the battle. "We survived this time," he said quietly, "but next time might not be so lucky. Whatever decision we make moving forward, it has to be unanimous. No more secrets, Doctor. Not from us, and not from yourself." Ilara nodded, guilt weighing heavily on her chest. She realized now that trust wasn't just about believing others. It was about being honest with herself. If she wanted to bridge two worlds, she would need to confront the truths hidden in her own heart first. And so, as the ship drifted silently above the shimmering moon, Ilara vowed to dig deeper, not just into the mysteries of the Lumivary, but into the depths of her own soul. Only then could she hope to lead humanity toward a brighter future, or prevent it from stumbling into darkness. The aftermath of the battle left an indelible mark on everyone aboard the Estrella. The crew moved through their tasks with a mix of exhaustion and unease, each member processing the events in their own way. For Dr. Ilara Voss, however, the weight of what had transpired felt heavier than ever. She sat alone in her quarters, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above her desk. Her eyes glowed faintly even in the dim light, a constant reminder of how much she had changed, and how far she still had to go. Silithra's words echoed in her mind. "You are the bridge." It was both a compliment and a burden, a title that came with expectations Ilara wasn't sure she could meet. Yet, as she replayed the events of the past days, the visions, the energy coursing through her body, the activation of the archive's defenses, she began to understand something crucial. This wasn't just about her abilities. It was about trust. Trust in herself, trust in Silithra, and ultimately, trust in humanity's capacity to grow beyond its flaws. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Lieutenant Jace Torres stood outside, his usual brash demeanor softened by concern. "Captain wants us in the meeting room," he said simply. "Something big." Ilara nodded and followed him silently. When they arrived, Captain Rennick was already there, along with engineer Mia Chen and the rest of the team. The atmosphere was tense, but it wasn't anger or fear driving them. It was urgency. "We've analyzed the data from the Purifier's attack," Rennick began without preamble. "Their weapons technology is unlike anything we've encountered before. More advanced than ours, and possibly even more advanced than the Lumivary's current arsenal." Mia leaned forward, her expression grim. which means they've been developing these weapons for a long time. This wasn't some spontaneous rebellion. It's been brewing for centuries. Rennick nodded. Exactly. And if they're willing to destroy the crystalline archive, and potentially Earth itself, to stop this reunification, then we're dealing with fanatics. Fanatics who see no value in compromise. Ilara clenched her fists under the table, her frustration bubbling to the surface. But why? Why would anyone oppose something so hopeful? Selithra said the Synthesis Alliance brought prosperity and growth. Why would anyone want to undo that? It's not about logic, Mia interjected gently. It's about fear. Fear of losing identity, of becoming something unrecognizable. Change is hard, especially when it challenges deeply held beliefs. Taurus snorted. And let's not forget ego. Some people can't stand the idea of sharing power or glory with others. Ilara sighed, rubbing her temples. So what do we do now? We can't fight them head-on. Not yet. But we can't ignore them either. Rennick crossed his arms, his voice firm but measured. We adapt. That's what humans do best. We find ways to survive, to thrive, even against impossible odds. Right now, our priority is securing the archive and ensuring Silithra's cooperation. If we can strengthen our bond with the Lumivary, maybe we can convince some of the purifiers to stand down, or at least weaken their resolve. And how do we do that? Taurus challenged. By hugging them too. No, Ilara cut in sharply, surprising even herself with her tone. By showing them we're worth trusting. By proving that humanity isn't the threat they think we are. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. For a moment, she felt exposed, vulnerable. But then she straightened up, determination hardening her features. I don't know everything about Silithra's people, but I know one thing. They value strength and integrity. If we show them we're capable of working together, for real, not just as pawns in someone else's game, they'll listen. Maybe not all of them, but enough to make a difference. Rennick studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right, Doctor. Let's assume you're right. What's step one? Step one is me. Ilara replied firmly. I need to fully embrace whatever it is I'm becoming. These abilities, I can't keep fighting them. They're part of me now, whether I like it or not. If I can master them, I might be able to help protect both sides, not just physically, but emotionally. I need to become the bridge Silithra says I am. Over the next few days, Ilara threw herself into training with renewed focus. Silithra guided her through increasingly complex exercises, pushing her limits until she could barely stand. At first, the sessions were grueling, leaving her physically drained and mentally exhausted. But gradually, she began to feel a shift, not just in her powers, but in her perspective. One evening, as they practiced in the crystalline chamber, Silithra paused mid-session. You've made remarkable progress, she said, her melodic voice tinged with pride. But true mastery requires more than skill. It demands understanding. Who you are, where you come from, and why you fight. Ilara frowned, lowering her hands. I thought I understood. I mean, I get the history. Humans and Lumivary were allies once, and now we're trying to rebuild that connection. But what? Silithra prompted gently. But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it, Ilara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. All this pain, all this risk. Is it really going to lead to something better? Or are we just setting ourselves up for another betrayal, another war? Silithra placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Doubt is natural, Ilara. Even the strongest bonds face trials. But remember this. The potential for failure does not negate the possibility of success. Every step you take brings us closer to a future neither of our species could achieve alone. Her words resonated deeply, settling into Ilara's heart like a seed waiting to sprout. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe, not blindly, but with cautious optimism, that perhaps change was possible. Perhaps unity didn't have to end in destruction. Back aboard the Estrella, Ilara shared her insights with the crew during another meeting. To her surprise, they listened intently, their skepticism giving way to cautious hope. Even Torres seemed less hostile, though he still peppered her with questions. "So what's the plan?" he asked finally. "How do we prove ourselves to these purifiers without getting vaporized?" Ilara smiled faintly. "We start small. We reach out to those who might still be undecided, those who haven't completely abandoned the idea of peace. If we can sway even a fraction of them, it could create a ripple effect. And if that doesn't work," Mia pressed. "Then we prepare for the worst," Ilara replied steadily. "But we don't give up. Not until every option has been exhausted." As the meeting adjourned, Ilara lingered behind, staring out the viewport at the shimmering moon below. The crystalline structures gleamed softly under the distant gas giant's glow, a beacon of hope amidst uncertainty. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. In fact, it might be the hardest thing she'd ever faced. But for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to face the shadows of the past. Ready to confront the doubts within herself. And ready to step fully into the role destiny had chosen for her. Because if she didn't, who ruled? The days turned into weeks as the Astraea crew worked tirelessly to strengthen their alliance with Silithra and her people. Dr. Ilara Voss had become a central figure in this delicate dance of diplomacy and discovery, her role evolving beyond that of a scientist or intermediary. She was now a symbol, a living testament to the possibility of unity between two vastly different species. Yet, with each step forward, she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing harder on her shoulders. Silithra's faith in her never wavered, but it came with expectations that tested Ilara's resolve. Every session in the crystalline chamber pushed her abilities further, unlocking new facets of the dormant powers within her. Her heightened senses allowed her to perceive things others couldn't, subtle shifts in energy, emotions rippling through the air like waves. But these gifts weren't without cost. The more she tapped into them, the more fragmented her sense of self became. Memories, not entirely hers, surfaced unbidden, blending with her own experiences until she wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. One evening, after an especially grueling day of training, Ilara found herself standing alone beneath the glowing spires of the crystalline structure. The air hummed softly around her, carrying whispers of ancient voices. She closed her eyes, letting the vibrations wash over her, grounding herself in the moment. For all its challenges, there was something profoundly beautiful about this place. It felt alive, aware, and somehow connected to her. "You are troubled." Silithra's voice broke the silence, melodic yet tinged with concern. Ilara opened her eyes and turned to face the alien queen. "I'm just trying to make sense of everything. Sometimes it feels like I'm losing myself in all of this." Silithra approached her, her iridescent armor shimmering faintly in the dim light. "You are not losing yourself, Ilara. You are finding pieces you never knew were missing. This process is not easy. It was never meant to be. But it is necessary." "I know," Ilara replied softly. "It's just hard to balance it all. Being human and being something else." Silithra tilted her head thoughtfully. "Perhaps it is time to stop seeing yourself as divided. You are both, and neither. That is the essence of the synthesis bond. To transcend limitations, to embrace duality." Her words resonated deeply, offering clarity where there had been confusion. Ilara nodded slowly, feeling a small measure of peace settle within her. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Back aboard the Astraea, Captain Rennick convened one final meeting before they prepared to leave the moon behind, at least temporarily. The crew gathered in the briefing room, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. "We've done what we came here to do," Rennick began, his tone measured but firm. "We've established communication with the Lumiveri, secured the archive, and gained valuable insights into their culture and ours. Now it's time to decide our next move." "What about the purifiers?" Lieutenant Torres asked, his usual skepticism tempered by genuine concern. "They're still out there, waiting for another chance to strike. And they'll keep striking unless we address the root of the problem. Mia Chen added. Fear doesn't disappear overnight. We need to find a way to reach them, to show them that coexistence isn't a threat. Ilara leaned forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. That's why I'm staying. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Rennick frowned. Staying? With the Lumavari? Yes, Ilara explained. If I go back to Earth now, it'll take months, or even years, for humanity to fully grasp what's at stake here. By then, the purifiers might have escalated their attacks. If I stay, I can act as an ambassador, helping to build trust between our peoples, while keeping lines of communication open. Torrid shook his head. That's insane. You'd be putting yourself in danger every second you're down there. I'll be safer here than anywhere else, Ilara countered. Silithra has promised to protect me. And besides, my presence gives us leverage. As long as I'm here, the purifiers won't risk escalating tensions too far. They may hate humans, but they respect Silithra. Rennick studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. All right, but this isn't a permanent decision. We'll check in regularly, and if things get too risky, you're coming back with us. Understood. Ilara smiled faintly. Understood. The farewell was bittersweet. As the Astraea prepared for departure, the crew gathered on the surface of the moon to say goodbye. Hugs were exchanged, promises made, and tears shed, though no one dared admit how much they feared for Ilara's safety. When the ship finally lifted off, leaving trails of fire in its wake, Ilara stood beside Silithra, watching it disappear into the vast expanse of space. For a moment, loneliness threatened to overwhelm her. Then Silithra placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You are not alone, she said gently. You carry your people with you, as you carry mine. Together, we will forge a new path. Ilara nodded, drawing strength from the alien queen's words. As the ground beneath her pulsed faintly with energy, she realized something profound. This wasn't the end of her journey. It was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, Ilara threw herself into her new role as ambassador. She mediated discussions between factions of the Lumavari, shared stories of Earth's triumphs and struggles, and worked tirelessly to bridge gaps in understanding. Slowly but surely, progress was made. Some among the purifiers began to question their leader's dogma, while others remained steadfast. But even those who opposed her couldn't deny the sincerity of her efforts. Through it all, Ilara continued to grow. Her abilities reached new heights, allowing her to heal wounds, stabilize crumbling structures, and even calm raging storms. Yet she never forgot her humanity, the compassion, curiosity, and resilience that defined her. These qualities, she realized, were what made her truly unique. One night, as she stood beneath the twin moons of the gas giant, gazing up at the stars, Silithra joined her. Do you ever wonder, Ilara mused aloud, if we're doing the right thing? If all of this will actually lead to something better? Silithra smiled faintly. The future is unwritten, Ilara. All we can do is plant seeds of hope and trust that they will grow. What you are building here, this fragile but powerful bond, is a foundation. And foundations endure. Ilara looked at her, gratitude swelling in her chest. Thank you for believing in me, for trusting me. It is not I who must believe, Silithra replied. It is your people and mine. You have given them reason to hope. That is a gift beyond measure. As the two stood side by side, bathed in the soft glow of the crystalline spires, Ilara felt a profound sense of purpose. She was neither fully human nor entirely Lumavari, but perhaps that was the point. In embracing both identities, she had become something greater, a bridge between worlds, a harbinger of change, and a beacon of possibility. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, she faced it with courage and conviction, because for the first time in her life, she understood the depth of Silithra's whispered promise. You were always meant to find your way back to us.